Hey Raven, I'm usually just here to listen to your stories, and I rarely comment, but I was actually listening to some older videos where you mentioned you used to be in IT, and it made me think about an experience I had that I think is worth sharing. It was pretty terrifying for me, and I think it can also be a good lesson or warning for others. Maybe you'll agree. Back in late 2020, early 2021, I had been laid off and was desperately trying to find a new job, as my savings and unemployment were running low. I work in IT and have for many years, so I was hopeful that with my experience, I would be able to find something pretty quickly. However, I was getting a lot of interviews with no follow-ups. But then, I got an email from someone by the name of Rose Michelle. I got it in my professional email that I only used for work-related stuff. I had it on my resume. I used it on applications, and it was tied to my accounts like LinkedIn, Snagajob, and whatever else was out there. So while I knew that spam could happen, I was feeling like it could be legitimate if they got my email from one of those sites. She said she was a creative director at a boutique marketing agency based in Chicago. Her profile looked legitimate. It had over 500 connections, a work history that seemed to check out, and recommendations from other professionals in the industry. No, I didn't do research on all the people and other businesses, but the sheer amount told me that it had to be real. She said in the email that she'd found my portfolio through a mutual connection and was impressed with my work. She explained that her agency was expanding and looking for remote graphic designers. But because of this and the salary she mentioned, which was almost double what I'd been hoping for, I was hopeful. But I know what some of you might be thinking. It has to be a scam, right? They hadn't even interviewed me yet and were already talking salary. That wasn't something that normally happened in this field. But this felt different. There seemed to be way too much proof and backup to support this being a real company. They even had a great-looking website with working links that didn't set off any red flags. We had a video interview where she showed me the agency's current projects and even gave me the names of other team members, saying that they were who I would directly be working with. The office I saw even appeared real. There was a large window to the side, and I could see cubicle walls behind her. Even the way Rose spoke to me about the company and the job, she clearly knew the industry. So after going over some normal interview questions and the job description, she said that she would pass the information on to her hiring manager, who would then reach out for the second and more formal interview. To my surprise, they called me the next day, and after a normal-sounding interview, I was offered the job. I was ecstatic. I thought they do seem to have a decent-sized following already, and the fact that they were expanding, I could really show off my skills here, and everything seemed to be turning around for me. And that same day, they asked me about payment methods, and I had to sign some paperwork digitally about agreeing to a background check. They said they would go ahead and start the onboarding process, and would just have a talk with me if anything turned up from it, but I knew that it wouldn't. I provided them with my bank information for direct deposits, and my address so they could send me the work laptop and whatever else I needed. To my surprise, I received a package 2 days later that was dropped off at my apartment. There was a pretty simple shipping label on it, with my address and name but no tracking numbers. And the return address had the name of a business and an address in Chicago. Clearly, it had to be my laptop. I opened it up, and I was honestly surprised to see the shell was scuffed up. It was missing one of the rubber feet on the bottom, and the screen was really dirty. I wondered if maybe it was damaged during shipping, but I couldn't explain why the screen was also dirty. Either way, I booted it up to see if it even worked, and I got the screen that was asking for the BIOS password. I knew that I wasn't going to be able to figure that out, So I emailed Rose asking if I could call, and she called me. I told her about the laptop and its condition. She apologized and said that with their expansion and reorg, they were lending out refurbished laptops from previous employers, and were planning on getting everyone who had a refurb unit a new one the following year. However, she said that it should have been at least cleaned beforehand, and that she would pass the information along. It made enough sense to me, so I moved on to the BIOS password issue, and that's where she seemed confused. She said that I should have received an email with all the login information. While she was on the phone, I scoured my email, even the spam folder, and I didn't have anything. I even checked my personal email just in case, but I didn't get anything. She seemed upset about this and apologized again, making a joke about how disorganized they seemed to be, and she said they were usually much better than this. I told her it was fine and even mentioned how new hire work is always so daunting, so I understood. That's when she suggested a, quote, temporary solution. She said if I was okay with it, I could install their proprietary design software on my personal computer while IT got back with us about the laptop. She even offered a $500 bonus on my first paycheck for the inconvenience of having to use my personal equipment. She explained that it would be active by user sessions, so once I got my work laptop set up, it would be deactivated on my personal system and I could then uninstall it. Looking back, I realized that this was one of the moments I should have known something wasn't right. But once again, the bonus offer and mentioning the one person / login per session made it seem real. She sent me a professional looking installer package and walked me through setting it up over video chat. I was nervous about installing unknown software. I'm not a genius when it comes to technical and security stuff. I know some things, but not enough. I'm better at making your website look pretty, not securing it, if you know what I mean. Anyway, she stayed on the line the entire time, explaining each step. The program looked legitimate too, with the professional interface and everything. Then she had me speak to one of their IT guys who helped me with the session number and some keys for it. Afterwards, he said that it would take about 8 to 10 hours to complete the setup, since they still had to activate my ID on their end anyways. So he said that it should all be ready for me by Monday morning to begin work. This all took place on a Friday. So I left my laptop open and on as he instructed, and finished up my night with dinner, whatever else I did, and then I went to bed. I'm thinking a lot of my anxiety then was probably just from starting a new job. Sadly, I was completely wrong. And the next day, my entire digital life imploded. I woke up to multiple alerts from financial accounts, and missed calls from those same banks and financial institutions. The text started as alerts for information being changed on my accounts. There were a few charge alert texts, and when I called the bank, they said that my accounts were completely locked down due to a bunch of risky activity. My address and phone number were changed. There was a request for checks and a new debit card. Tons of changes were being made. And there was even an application for a credit card and a personal loan. Unfortunately, because of the amount of activity, they couldn't do anything over the phone other than assure me that the accounts would actually remain closed until I went to a local branch with my ID to clear it all up in person. I started getting ready to head to the bank when I saw texts from friends and family too. They were asking me if my accounts, like social media, had been popped. I tried logging in and nothing was working. One of my friends sent pictures of the Facebook, Insta, Snapchat, and even Discord, where I was posting link after link of crypto scams and other similar things. And that's when it hit me. It had to be my laptop. I ran to my office and my stomach dropped. I thought I was going to be sick. There on my screen was this horrible box that I'd seen in the news, on posts, etc. It was ransomware. They had everything. Any logins I've ever used, social media, banking, cloud, any documents like taxes, all of it. Hell, I had sent them a picture of my ID, my social security number, and I gave them my bank account information for direct deposit. I tried to contact Rose by phone, but of course the number didn't work. I couldn't log into my emails, so I tried finding her or the business on LinkedIn. She didn't exist whatsoever, and neither did the business. How does a business with hundreds of interactions and connections just disappear? I tried Googling the company and found a very similar one, but the name didn't end in Inc., like the one that I had been working with. Now it was making sense. They were trying to look like a real, reputable company, which clearly worked. Just like that, they were gone, and so was all of my money, my security, and my identity. I spent the next week in a nightmare of going to banks, calling places, freezing credit, filing police reports, and trying to regain control of not just my accounts, but my life. I tried taking my computer to both a professional and a friend whom I call a computer genius, and they both told me the same thing. You can try to wipe the computer, but that was about it. Because there was no way I was going to give them more of my money. When I filed the police report, the detective that I spoke to told me how he had heard very similar situations plenty of times. The person that I spoke to was most likely the most real person there, or the face of the scam. He said they would change up their looks to look completely different from the last person and use a completely different name. He explained how these scammers would install a remote access Trojan, also known as a rat, which gave them complete access to my computer and files, and when they got what they wanted, would insert ransomware. The one thing he was surprised about was that I actually received a laptop. Unfortunately, whoever dropped it off knocked once, and they were gone by the time I got to the door. I was also living in an apartment, so I didn't have anything like a Ring camera to capture anyone. I did bring in the laptop in the box that it came in, and looking at it more made me feel like even more of an idiot. The shipping label was obviously fake. It was like a copied one, and it had a random number for tracking because it didn't exist. And when we looked up the address for the, quote, company, it went to some FedEx in Chicago. But speaking to someone at the actual company, which was an entertaining call on its own, they told me they didn't do anything through FedEx either. The laptop itself looked like it was clearly someone's computer, but was it one of theirs? Was it a victim that was scammed or maybe stolen? They asked to keep it for evidence, and I didn't hesitate. I honestly didn't want it in my house. My friend wanted me to keep it so he could mess around with it, and while I was curious, I would rather give it to the police if there was any chance that it could help them. He did, however, set expectations, telling me the odds of finding these people were pretty much zero. But he was hopeful that they would catch one of them someday. It's been 4 years now, and I'm still dealing with the ripple effects. I get calls about suspicious attempts on my accounts. My bureaus are all still frozen because I still get the random attempts for applications, and even a car loan one time. I got most of my money back, but there was still a lot of irreparable damage that I will most likely always live with. Don't worry, I've never fallen for anything like that again. And I did finally find a real job with a real company, but I've definitely learned my lesson. If you're ever job hunting, be smart about it. Be wary of recruiters that reach out to you unsolicited, and do heavy research on the company. And under absolutely no circumstances should you download anything from someone that you don't know, no matter how legit it seems or how much money they promise you. Because take it from me, it is not worth the risk. I had a pretty normal childhood. I had 3 siblings, one older, 2 younger, that I got along with most of the time. My parents were still together, and they were pretty normal people. I even had my normal group of friends that I stuck to through most of my childhood as well, but there was one part that started normal that escalated pretty quickly, and I still think about it on occasion. I had this friend growing up that I'll call April. We'd been super close, and she was my usual go-to for those invite one friend events. We were so much alike, and I'm sure that's why we got along so well. But one thing that I didn't like about her wasn't her at all, but her older brother, who I'll call Corey. Corey was 5 years older than us, and he was an outright jerk, to put it nicely. He always tried to do things to annoy April or pick a fight. He would barge into her room to knock something over. He had tossed water at us before, ruining one of my coloring books. Just really anything to be a nuisance. But it never made sense to me because every time April would yell at him, and her parents would reprimand him, I never understood why he kept it up, knowing he was going to get in trouble. He also was never just mean to her. He directed his bullying at me a lot too. He would make fun of me. His favorite thing was about my braces and skin condition. I used to have eczema really bad on my face. He would make jokes, throw stuff at me. He'd even tripped me and pushed me before. I didn't really do anything other than yell at him to stop, and when April would say something too, he would once again get in trouble. It was just something we dealt with when I wanted to go over to her house. She went to my house more than anything, but when I would go to hers, I would just brace myself for having to deal with Corey at times. Like I mentioned, I had been friends with April for a very long time. So, as we grew up and changed together, so did Corey. At the time of this story, we were both 14 and Corey was now 19. He was actually going to a nearby college and worked at the same shop as his dad, but he was still living at home. Unfortunately, he was still his same bullying self, but with a twist. Now, he gave off these weird vibes. His bullying became more about my body, teasing about how I had developed. I was compared to other girls his age, and he made weird nicknames for me. April always told him to knock it off. Being older, she stood up to him more. I typically just ignored him and he would walk off since it wasn't getting to me anymore. Due to there being a holiday on a Monday, we had a longer weekend, so my parents agreed to let me stay at April's on a Sunday. Her parents were going to be going out that night for a friend's party, so we were going to have the place to ourselves. Well, mostly. Corey would be there too, and we expected the normal from him, but we both agreed that it was worth it to be adult-free. We started by watching music videos in the living room. Early 2000s and cable TV meant we had MTV on demand, and it was one of our favorite things to do. Everything started fine. We hadn't really seen Corey much until later that night. We were still in the living room when he finally came out and greeted me with one of the names he liked to call me, and we both ignored him. He sat in the recliner and was watching TV with us, and when we talked, he would try to push himself into the conversation. But he would actually say something relevant. He wasn't doing his normal obnoxious things that he did. It was weird, but a nice change, I'll be honest. But as we watched TV, I felt like I was being stared at, and would look over at him to see him staring at me. It was weird, and I really didn't understand why. At one point in the night, April's parents called the home phone and asked her to change out the laundry as she'd forgotten. She got off the phone, informed me that she would be back, and then went downstairs. After she left, Corey looked around the corner where the basement stairs were, and then went and sat next to me on the couch, putting his arm behind it. I remember looking at him funny, but ultimately just went back to the show and ignored him. Shortly after, he tried talking to me, but it was a normal conversation, something I wasn't used to with him. I remember talking to him like I was expecting it to turn into a joke at some point, but it never did. He asked if I was ready to be done with school, about my siblings, all of that. But then, his questions turned a bit more personal. He asked if I had a boyfriend, currently or before, how far I'd gone with the boy, and commented on how grown up I looked compared to last year. I just tried to be vague and give short answers because it was making me feel really uncomfortable. Then he put his hand on my knee and offered to experiment with me if I wanted. I jumped off the couch and went to the bathroom, locking myself in until I heard April come back upstairs. I was scared he may try to stop me if he saw me go downstairs, so I went to a room that would make sense and I could lock the door. When I heard April come up and tell Corey to move, I hollered for her. When she met me, I pulled her into the bathroom and told her what Corey had said and done. She apologized and agreed that he had been weird lately. She even said that he had asked about me and when I was coming over again. Neither of us expected him to get like this, otherwise we would have just gone to my house. We instead decided to move it to her room for the rest of the night to avoid him. After doing whatever in her room for a few hours, with no interruptions from Corey, we got ready for bed, as both of us were getting pretty tired. She had a pretty big bed, so we were both on it, me on the side closest to the door. I'm not sure how long I was out, but I remember waking up at some point and it was still dark outside. I remember being in that weird state between sleeping and waking up, where everything feels slightly unreal. As I lied there, trying to fall back to sleep, something made me open my eyes again. I looked around the room as I was facing the door, and that's when it finally registered in my head. The door was cracked open. The light in the hallway was shining right on my face, and there was a dark figure in the doorway. I blinked a few times trying to focus, but no matter what I did, the figure was still there. I was trying to remember if we left the door open or not, because that was the only thing that I could think of, until the figure started moving. It entered the room slowly and turned, and that's when I realized it was Corey. He shut the door, and then I watched his figure from the little moonlight that was coming in through the window as he walked slowly towards the bed. I had completely froze. I couldn't move, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what I could do. Your brain does weird things in moments of fear and probably being half awake at that matter, and mine decided that if I stayed still and kept my eyes mostly closed, that he would just go away. That maybe if he realized I wasn't awake to witness his torment, then he wouldn't bother. But I now know that's not what he was going for. Corey knelt at the edge of the bed, and I could hear him breathing. I held my eyes mostly closed and watched him as he started reaching for the blanket. I had balled some of it into my fist and tucked my hand under my head to hold it in place, but I could feel him pulling on it. He finally managed to yank it out of my hand, which made me jump. There was no way he didn't know I was awake at that point. He whispered my name, and the next thing I heard was, "What are you doing in my room?" Corey jumped back, and I sat up to see April turning on her lamp. She kept screaming at him, and he made his way towards the door with his hands out, like he was trying to calm her down. I remember pulling the blanket back up around me and listening to Corey say, "Be quiet," April kept yelling at him, and her parents were now in the room yelling as well. April told her parents what she saw, and to my surprise, she woke up to the jolt of him pulling down the blanket. They asked me the same, and I told them how I saw him walk into the room. I saw their dad's face turn red, and he grabbed Corey by his shirt and dragged him out of the room. Her mom came over to us and apologized, and April demanded that she should get a lock for her door, and her mom nodded. She stayed there with us to try and calm us down and talk to us. She tried telling us about the party. They apparently hadn't even been home very long before this happened. It was nice of her to do this, but I could still hear her dad yelling and Corey apologizing repeatedly in the next room. After some time, her mom left the room and told us to go back to sleep. It took us a while. April was asking me what all happened and apologized, but I think we were both a bit too awake to sleep again. The next morning, I waited until April was awake before we left her room. When we stepped into the living room, her dad was asleep on the couch, and Corey was nowhere around. April later told me that her dad probably slept out there to make sure he didn't try anything again. I didn't know this at the time, but her parents told my parents what had happened, and I wasn't allowed back over there. I was kind of upset, but at the same time, okay with it. April was still able to stay at our place. At that age, I was creeped out, but the fact that nothing worse happened, and I never saw him again, it was enough to make me push it behind me. Once I started high school, April started hanging out with a different crowd, and we drifted apart. No hate or anything, we just weren't the same people. But this all came back up around now that I'm an adult because she had actually recently added me on Facebook. I noticed that as we chatted, she never brought up her brother, and I feared maybe he died or something, and I really didn't want to talk about it. I saw that her father had passed away from her previous posts, and she didn't mention it, so I assumed it was the same situation. Until I started looking for him. I don't know why I did it, but I guess I was just curious where the guy that tried to flirt with a child ended up. Turns out, he's actually doing time for assault and domestic battery. So, I guess some people never change. I'm thankful that April wasn't like that, and that her parents even seemed to believe us. Her parents were always very kind and supportive, so it's strange to me that he ended up the way that he did. I can only hope that his other victims were able to heal and move on with their lives. For the longest time, I never understood why, or how even, people died in their cars during blizzards. I won't lie, I was one of those people that was quick to be judgmental. Just stay in your car, keep the exhaust pipe clear, run the engine periodically for heat. It all sounds so simple, until you're actually living it. Until I almost became one of those statistics. This happened during a brutal storm that hit the north in 2019. Some of you might remember it. Temperatures dropped to around negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Dozens of motorists had to be rescued from roads and highways. It was pretty bad. I was actually driving back from visiting my sister for the weekend, trying to beat an incoming storm. We watched the forecast at her place that morning talking about a wintry mix. Some saying it would hit overnight, others predicting late afternoon. The National Weather Service had issued a winter storm warning, but like many locals, I'd grown a bit complacent about some of the warnings. I felt I knew how to drive in it and was confident in my abilities. I decided to risk it, thinking I could easily make the 4-hour drive before anything serious developed. I was so incredibly wrong. The snow started about 2 hours into my drive. At first it wasn't bad, just light flakes that barely stuck to the road. But if you're at all familiar with the snow, you know just how fast things can change. Within 20 minutes, the wind had picked up, and the snow got thicker. The road was practically non-existent, and the few cars I had seen had either pulled off, exited with their hazards on, or were far ahead of me. When I slowed down as much as I did, part of me said that I should turn around, but I fell into that deadly trap of thinking, I've already come this far, so I kept going, driving slower and slower as visibility continued to drop. My car's thermometer was showing the outside temp dropping rapidly. The mistake that nearly killed me came about 2.5 hours into my drive. There was a steep incline that I had to take, and the roads hadn't been touched. I tried speeding up to get over, but very quickly, I started skidding. My little car didn't stand a chance. I tried to back up some, thinking maybe I needed more momentum, but no dice. I still couldn't get over that hill. But then you think, okay, turn around and find a path around it, which is what I was going to do. But the road was very narrow. I tried to do a K-turn and got stuck on the side of the road, in a little divot, I suppose. No matter how much I tried to drive through or back up, I was not budging. And the more I tried, the deeper of a hole I was putting myself in. I even dug out the snow around my tires with my scraper, and tried pushing it while it was in neutral. Believe me, I know that was stupid too, but don't worry, it didn't work. I'm a fairly small girl, so there was no way I was moving it alone. So, I decided it was time to throw up the flag. I called 911 and advised them that I needed help as I was stuck in the snow. The dispatcher was kind but direct. They told me the highway patrol was overwhelmed. This obviously wasn't the first call they had about this, and there were a bunch of accidents and other stranded motorists. It was going to be a while before they could reach me. She said if I had someone that could get me to safety, I could go that route, but only if we were sure that they wouldn't be risking themselves. Otherwise, she told me to stay with my car, and she told me to do those basic things I mentioned before. Keep the exhaust pipe clear, run the engine, and conserve gas while staying warm. The first 2 hours weren't bad. I had about half a tank of gas, an almost full 32-ounce cup of water, and my coffee thermos that I filled before I left my sister's because I'm one of those weirdos that drinks coffee all day. I also had a few meat sticks and cookies for me to snack on during my drives, so I still had a few of both left over. I had on a heavier winter coat, gloves, and a hat, and I even had a blanket that I kept in my trunk with an emergency kit. After a fire in an apartment complex I used to live in traumatized me, I put together a little jump ship bag, if you will, and I kept it in my car. It had spare clothing, including necessities, a phone charger, and a few other things you wouldn't think about in those situations. I had my cell phone that still had a good amount of battery left, but I did have a charger in the car too, just in case, as well as my Kindle. I called my sister to let her know what happened, and she even offered to have her husband come help me, but I refused. I was already 2.5 hours in, and I didn't want him to risk getting out and getting stuck with me, although he did drive a truck. I also didn't want him to get most of the way and then have emergency services beat him there and have him waste the drive. I told her I just wanted to let her know and that I would update her when I got out, and she agreed. I started to read from my Kindle and tried to just relax. The snowfall was pretty to watch, even if I was covered in it. But I had my coffee and my books, so I was trying to make the most of it. I got out of the car every so often to make sure the snow didn't pile up around my exhaust, and then I would get back in and run the car for those 10 minutes. But as time passed, the snow didn't let up. In fact, it started coming down heavier and faster. I found myself checking my exhaust more often, and even took some time to kick away the extra snow around the back to try and prevent buildup. This, of course, made me colder, so it took me longer to warm up when I got back in. I couldn't read anymore as it was making me drowsy, and I knew it was bad to fall asleep in a situation like this. So I switched to playing a game on my phone to keep me occupied. I would play it while I had my car on, so I could charge it, but it was struggling to keep up with the power I was using and charging at the same time, so I had to limit myself there too. As the sun began to set, that's when things got a lot worse. The temperature had dropped to -5 degrees. Each time I opened the door, more cold air and snow blew in, and it would get harder to warm the car back up. I thought maybe I could put more space in between each time I checked the exhaust, but I was too afraid to do that, thinking maybe I was feeling tired because the exhaust wasn't able to escape. So I continued checking, and would continue to get colder and start this process all over. The real terror started to set in around hour 4. My gas was getting lower, down under a quarter of a tank, and my movement was getting sluggish. It was a struggle choosing between dangerously cold and low on gas, or running the engine longer to stay warm. I tried to distract myself by calling my sister back and acting like everything was fine. I told her that I was doing fine, just cold and bored, but I could hear it in her voice that she didn't believe me. She again offered to come out and help, but I declined, and said that I would call the highway patrol to get an update, and she agreed to let me go. The dispatcher had given me 2 different numbers to call to get updates, or report back if anything changed, so I called. To my surprise, they said they were trying to reach me, but there were 2 abandoned vehicles blocking them that they had to clear first, and make sure that no one was in sight of them as well. By the 5th hour, I was fighting to stay awake. I was out of coffee. I couldn't really afford to run my car anymore, so I could at least drive to a gas station. And I didn't want to kill the battery, so I didn't want to touch my phone anymore. I tried to recite the lyrics to songs or poems that I knew to keep my mind occupied, but it only half worked. My eyes were heavy, and I know I drifted off for a few moments at one point. I even rolled down the window hoping the cold air might jolt me awake, and grabbed my blanket, wrapping it around me too. I knew this was bad, but I had to do something. I risked using up more battery and grabbed my phone to call my sister and asked her husband to make the drive. I didn't know how much longer it was going to take, but I needed to do something. And as I sat in the car bundled up, slowly drifting in and out of consciousness, that was when I really started to get scared. My movements were slow, and while I was panicking in my mind, my heart rate was normal, even slower than normal. It was a truly weird experience, but I didn't know what I could even do about it. Then, at one point, I had my eyes closed, reciting whatever I could, when I started seeing a bright light reaching my eyelids. I opened my eyes to see a big truck coming towards me, and I think I nearly passed out then. I remember saying, "They can just watch me sleep, I'll be fine." I don't know how long I was out, but it felt like a long time. I was awoken to a knocking on my window, and I got out to see a cop and a tow truck driver standing by my door. I remember the tow truck driver's smile as he asked me if I was all right. He then said that I could go sit in his truck because he kept the heat running, and help myself to his coffee. My legs were sluggish, but I ran as fast as my body permitted. I watched as the trucker pulled my car out of the pile, and that's when I realized just how much it had snowed. With the wind, the snow was nearly at the bottom of the windows on the passenger side, and there was probably about a foot on top. I had stopped checking the exhaust after I called my sister, so that had even started piling up. I could have suffocated. When all was said and done, they towed my car to the closest sign of life, a 24/7 gas station, and gave me directions around that hill. I was one of the lucky ones that was able to get my car back that same day. Some people were having to wait until the next day because of how deep they were in. On the way, the truck driver was telling me how he had already rescued so many people that day that he had lost count, and he was probably going to be out for a few more hours before he even went home. I talked to him about how I had even thought about walking, and he told me I was smart for not doing that. He mentioned that the temps had dropped to -15 degrees, down to -40 with the wind, and I easily could have died from exposure. He said it like my father would have, and it stuck with me ever since, that concern he had in his voice. This man had seen a lot, so I trusted his judgment. Once I was at the gas station, I thanked the truck driver and called my sister to tell them to turn around. But, per her demands, I did not try to drive home that night. I did find a nearby hotel and agreed to stay there for the night. After 6 hours of sitting in a cold car, I really wanted a hot meal and a warm bed. The next day was looking a lot better. They had already started plowing and treating the roads, but I still took the alternate route that the trucker gave me, and I got home with practically no further issues. Just a little skidding here and there. I know that I was incredibly lucky. If I had had less gas, if my phone had died or I didn't have a charger, or if I hadn't kept clearing my exhaust pipe, this story may not have existed. I thought my emergency bag had everything I needed, but I learned what it was missing. I put an extra set of gloves, a scarf, and a blanket in it, and I even got a mini shovel to keep in the back. And if they mention a storm, I don't even try to challenge it. Because until you're in that moment, you don't realize just how important each decision you make becomes. Everything happens decision by decision, each one seeming reasonable at the time, until you find yourself trapped in a metal box while the snow piles higher and higher. Moral of the story: learn from my mistakes, and if you can, just stay home. As if being a small startup business wasn't hard enough, I quickly learned that there were more difficulties involved than just inventory and upset customers. I have a small candle and essential oil business. I also make lotions, incense, and other small items, but my candles and oils are the big sellers. I'm quite proud of what I have, as I did it all on my own. I do okay for myself, but as I made more and more sales, I quickly learned that I needed a better system than my little Facebook page. I set up an Etsy page so that orders could be placed through there, with little to no interaction from me. Paid through the site, and then I could get the orders and put them together quickly. It worked out much better for me, and I was enjoying the organization. But then I had an order that changed everything for me. I got an order from someone by the name of Marcus for my best-selling lavender meditation candle. Nothing unusual. I got dozens of orders every week, and that one was usually included. I packed the order as I usually do, included my thank you and please leave a review card, and a freebie. A week or two later, I got a review from a Marcus that also left a photo of the candle and a freebie that I gave. And the review was a great one. It was detailed, and he raved about how fast it was shipped and the quality of the item. He even made a comment about how the woman who owns this business must be beautiful because her work is extraordinary. A little cheesy, but also kind of cute. And I appreciated the reviews that were more than just 5 stars smells good. I replied thanking them for the kind words, and that was about it. But the next day, I got an email from Marcus. My email is on my Facebook page, Because if people had a customized order, I asked them to email me with additional information, or if they had any questions. I have something similar set up on my Etsy page, but they also have better options for custom orders, so I got less emails from my Etsy orders. Anyways, Marcus emailed me, thanking me again for the candle, telling me how the scent helped with his anxiety and seemed to be the only thing that helped him sleep. Again, it just seemed like a very satisfied customer, and as a small business, they were nice to read, so I replied thanking them for their kind words. A week later, he ordered 2 more candles, this time asking if it was possible to make them extra strong. I made these myself, so I was happy to do so. When he received his order, he sent me another email with a long message about how he had been struggling with insomnia since his wife passed away, and my candles were the first thing that brought him peace. He genuinely seemed lonely, and as someone who had just lost my father a few years prior, I sympathized. He was the one that pushed me to start my business, and to do what made me happy, so the fact that I had this kind of impact on someone else who needed help, it meant a lot to me. But unfortunately, that was where I made my first mistake. We started exchanging messages through email about grief and healing. He ordered candles weekly, always leaving glowing reviews on Facebook. Sometimes he would even request custom scents, describing memories of his late wife, her favorite flower, the perfume she wore, her favorite cake that she baked, and how it made the whole house smell like a bakery. It felt meaningful to help someone through their grief, and it challenged me to try new scent combinations. But then, he asked me more about the perfume. He said he couldn't quite place what the scent was, and asked if I could make a custom candle or oil based on it. I told him I would be willing to try it, and he offered to mail me the perfume so I could use it, and insisted that I keep it as a thank you gift, because he had a feeling that I would love it too, claiming that I reminded him a lot of his wife. Once again, in my feelings, I accepted. I had a P.O. box that I used for my business, and as the return address, so I told him he could just send it there. Once I received it, I was surprised to find out that the perfume was the same one that I wore. At the time, I thought it was a crazy coincidence. I would wear the same perfume as his wife, and now my candles help him sleep. Based on the ages and years he mentioned, I assumed that he and his late wife were probably in their 50s or 60s. I was 29 when this took place, so there's a pretty significant age difference. It was still possible that his wife wore the perfume, though, so I had no real reason to question it. I did tell him that it was the same perfume I used and that, coincidentally, I had been trying to replicate it because I wanted a matching candle for it. At the time, I didn't notice that he wasn't surprised by this, but rather, he just asked how long it would take to make it, since I had a head start. I worked more on my candle, now having a reason to focus on it, and when I was pretty satisfied with it, I sent him one for free, wanting to make sure he also agreed that it was good. I didn't want him to pay for it if he wasn't satisfied with the scent. He said that it was great and thanked me for it. But then my happiness slowly changed to paranoia, as his emails continued and seemed a bit too close to home. He started requesting candles based on other things that reminded him of his late wife. He mentioned how she loved making homemade breads and how her favorite was sourdough. A few days later, he emailed me about how she grew an herb garden and their little green room always smelled like rosemary. He even mentioned how she collected vintage teacups and used them as flower pots. All of these seemed normal and sweet, and I would agree, except his emails would come the day after I posted about the exact same thing. I made a post about how I had started getting into making my own breads, and how sourdough had been the most challenging but fun one to do. I made a post about my little herb garden that I had on my back patio and the money saved being able to grab what I needed from my backyard. I even made a post about the vintage teacups I had just found at an antique store and was contemplating using them for pots or displaying them on a shelf. It was getting close to Valentine's, and I got a lot of orders around then, so when I started getting more and more of his emails, I started feeling overwhelmed. My friend was over one day helping me pack orders, and that's when I brought up Marcus. I told her previously about the perfume, and we both thought it was just a crazy coincidence. But when I was venting about all these other custom orders, she became curious. She asked to see his order history, and I showed it to her. Then she pulled out her phone and showed me what she found. This was when I saw the connection of his requests with my Facebook posts. Every single memory of his wife was actually a detail from my personal life. Was it possible that she had the same hobbies and interests? Absolutely. But I still didn't like the odds. I also didn't know where to go with this information. I didn't feel right accusing him of following me or something because it was entirely possible that he was telling the truth. Maybe something about me did remind him of his wife, and that's why he was so attached. And since I couldn't exactly confront him about this, I just blocked him on Etsy and filtered his messages, so I didn't see them. I was already overwhelmed, and the custom orders he was wanting were becoming more and more obscure, and I wasn't going to be able to complete them. But then I started getting new order requests from very similar accounts. To explain, his account was listed as Marcus James, and these new accounts would be Marcus J, James M, things like that. At first, I was going to just fulfill his orders because it was for my normal inventory, but then he would send me an email about his specific candle helping him sleep after his wife passed. But the candle wasn't the lavender one that he told me the first time. So, was he lying? Was he trying to be a different person, and why? He wasn't getting anything from me other than his orders, so what was his end goal? I ended up refunding and canceling the orders, wanting nothing to do with it. But then I got a message on my business Facebook page from a James Marcus asking me to make a candle based on a soap that his late wife used. I responded to that one and addressed him as Marcus, saying I could no longer help him and suggested a few other candle places to try. That was apparently the wrong response. I got friend requests from one Marcus account after another, each profile having very little on it like it was just recently created. All of these accounts then would post on my business page, leaving angry messages about how people shouldn't use me because I lead people on and ruin their lives. So many people started reacting and commenting to these, family, friends, returning customers, and new ones, all asking what was going on. I tried blocking them all and making a post about how it was a situation with one particular customer that I had become uncomfortable with and they blew up, but it seemed like he just kept going. I was feeling drained. I tried to focus on my orders and forget about it, trying to weed out all the fake accounts as they came around. But it all came to a head when I went to the post office to drop off some packages. When I pulled up, I saw a middle-aged man standing outside the doors. I assumed he was waiting for someone, so I paid no further attention to him. He held the door open for me, and I thanked him, and that was it. Until I was leaving. As I was walking back to my car, I heard someone say my name. I turned around, and that same man was walking towards me. I was confused. How did this man know my name? Stupidly, I waited for him to approach me, and when he did, he grabbed my arms near my shoulders and started shaking me, demanding to know why I wouldn't talk to him anymore. It had to be Marcus. I screamed to let me go, and he squeezed my arms tighter. Finally, someone came out of the building and yelled at him too, which finally got him to release his grip. The guy asked if I was okay, and said that he was calling the cops. And the other guy that I assumed to be Marcus left. We still waited for the police because now he had gone too far. He had stopped me in person and hurt me, and I was not letting that go. Thankfully, the police took it seriously as I explained everything about this guy. I went over the emails, my posts, and his requests, how I had to block him, all of it. They made a report, and the other guy gave a statement as a witness. Bless him. And then I went home scared as hell that he may have followed me somehow. But there's one more piece to this that makes it even more confusing. I was also in this small local business group on Facebook and had posted about Marcus, explaining what all happened, wanting to warn others if he showed up. To my surprise, I got several responses from other female business owners talking about how they had a similar experience. The guy would go by Marcus or James, and he always talked about how his wife, mother, or daughter died, and their products helped him grieve. One of them had posted about it a few years prior, which made sense as to why I hadn't seen it. But the others said they never shared their experience because they thought it was just them being targeted. It was insane to see how many of us had similar experiences. I no longer felt bad for what happened. I no longer felt like this was a situation of someone being really lonely and me just overreacting. This guy was making up these stories and playing on our emotions to replicate our life in his own home. It was creepy, to put it nicely. None of us could put together why he was doing this either. But much like the others mentioned, they either involved the police, filed restraining orders, or sent a pretty mean email back to them, and they never heard from him again. I didn't hear or see him after the day at the post office, and I received no other emails, posts, or reviews from him. I am thankful that it stopped, but I've always become concerned that he only found a new girl to target. Back in middle school and high school, I was a pretty big band geek. I played the cello, and I've always loved it. Still do. I also participated in multiple band concerts, including one that was held in our town's plaza. It was a holiday concert, and the mayor even showed up. I remember being pretty psyched about it. The only other event that sat that high for me was a contest our school band was invited to. It was a prestigious music competition being held in New Hampshire, about 4 hours away. The grand prize was a $5,000 scholarship, which did have my parents practically pushing me to go. Not that they needed to, however. I was just as excited to go. I had several friends in band, including a girl that I was crushing on, and a 4-hour bus ride with them all sounded like a great time, even if we had to perform for complete strangers with a bigger purpose. So we got all packed up, and my mom dropped me off at the school around 6 a.m. on Friday. Another bonus, we got to miss out on a day of school. Of all the students in band, 16 of us were selected for the contest, but only 12 of us were attending. So, other than the 12 of us students, there was our band teacher, Mr. Walter, the bus driver, Dave, which we all knew pretty well, and 2 parents who chaperoned, Rebecca's mom and Dylan's mom. I remember before we left, my parents and the adults were talking about the weather we were expecting that day. There had been talks of snow in the forecast, but in New England, that's hardly news in February. My parents said that there was supposed to be some light snow in the evening, but that we should either be home or almost home by the time that happens, so no big deal. We all loaded on the bus. I headed to the back where I liked to sit, along with my friends Dylan, Andrew, Kate, and Heather. I was hoping to spend some more time with Heather. The drive out there was fine. Dave was always trying to get us to play songs for him, or would ask if we knew this song or that. He was always fun to ride with. He was actually Dylan's normal bus driver, so I was used to him as well. We had some time once we arrived, so we stopped somewhere for lunch before we made our way to the center, where the contest would be held. Once there, we got to go on a small tour of the history of the state, before we were finally led to a room that we could set up in and prepare for our turn. There were a lot of people there, and each school got their own room to prepare in. It took hours before it was completed, but even through the nerves, I thoroughly enjoyed it. By the time we finished, around 5 p.m., it had started to snow heavier, and was turning to sleet. Mr. Walter and the two moms started rushing all of us to get on the bus, saying that we needed to get going. Mr. Walter and Dylan's mom did a head count each, and once they were satisfied that everyone was accounted for, Dave started the bus and we headed back home. We were all in similar, if not the same seats that we started in. The first hour of the ride was normal. The snow was falling heavier and faster, but Dave was experienced and careful. He started doing what he normally did, asking us what songs we played and so forth. But then, as the wind picked up and the snowfall thickened, he got quieter, clearly trying to focus. The rest of us noticed too, and our chatter and laughter died down, and we spoke as if we were in a library, trying to not be a distraction to the adults. The weather was clearly getting worse than what was anticipated, and I think a lot of us were looking a bit concerned. We could feel the wind slamming into the bus, and hear it whistling as it found its way through the crevices. I could barely see the other cars on the highway anymore. Their headlights looked like dim floating orbs amidst whiteness. Dave was taking it slow, and I had no concerns about his driving, but I did have to worry about others. Some people were trying to pass the big yellow bus, and probably going faster than they should have been. But at least they weren't putting more pressure on us. But then some people aren't as careful as others. I remember looking out the different windows around me, and since I was sitting in the back, I frequently watched the cars behind us. And that's when I saw the truck. It was just a pair of headlights at first, but I could tell that they were approaching way too fast through the snow. I immediately got a bad feeling about this truck, and I remember verbally saying, "Oh hell," and my friend sitting with me looked where I was focused. We watched as this truck sped towards us, in our lane, then it tried to jump over to the lane to our left, but there was a smaller sedan there. Without signaling or slowing down, he just veered over. The sedan honked, and the truck tried to veer back into our lane, but did it way too fast. This made the truck fishtail a bit, and they nearly hit the sedan that had slowed down. I watched as the truck driver threw his hands up in an aggressive manner, and then veered over to the other lane faster. This time, I don't know what his intentions were, but he did it so fast that he started sliding again and clipped the bus. I remember that sound of metal crunching on metal, as the truck tried to speed up to get away from the bus, but it only seemed to make it worse. It caused the bus to also lose control, and we heard Dave curse, which he never did, at least not around us kids. Dave tried to control the bus, but it was too much. I could feel the tires slipping in the snow and ice-covered road, and I looked around at everybody. Dave was gripping the steering wheel tightly as it jerked in his hands. The moms were telling us to stay seated and calm, and Mr. Walters was now standing, bracing onto the seat looking out the front. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough. The bus seemed to be moving on its own, and it hit the dip in the shoulder. Everyone was screaming and being jerked to the right. And when all the weight shifts in something like a large bus, it's not good. The bus felt like a big toy being thrown around, and we all felt it tilting. I watched Dave furiously trying to control it to get us back on all tires, but I don't think it was in his control anymore. We all felt the pull to the right as we hit the ditch, and in that moment, it felt weightless. We had flipped and were now at a stop. To make it worse, we all had our instruments with us that slid right along with us. Some of us landed on top of the hard cases, while others, such as myself, ended up with them piling on me. I didn't move. I was trying to determine if this was all real, until I heard Dave ask if everyone was okay. And that's when I started hearing people groaning, some crying. I looked under me and I'll never forget seeing the window flush with the dirt and snow. We really were on our side, in the middle of nowhere. I slowly sat up and looked around, and everyone else was in a similar position to what I was in. The 4 adults started to help the kids, removing instrument cases and doing quick lookovers to make sure we were all physically okay. Dave was apologizing for everything, but I still don't believe he did anything wrong. And based on the way the other adults responded, I don't think they did either. Once we were all standing, I think that it's when it finally hit us. We were all stuck there until help arrived. Dave shut off the bus. Of course, we couldn't keep it running, but that just meant we were going to be in the cold for a while. Dylan's mom was on the phone calling for help, and we could hear someone shouting outside. We all tried to make our way to the front of the bus, and we saw a car, the same one that was hit by the truck, had stopped on the shoulder, with a woman shouting towards us. Dave went to the back of the bus and opened the emergency door. He said that we should all get out for safety reasons. And slowly, the adults all helped us out of the bus, leaving everything else in it. I heard Dylan's mom say that help was on the way, but they didn't know how long it would be due to the weather and how many accidents there already were around the state. This was some time ago, so most of us kids didn't have a cell phone. We couldn't even phone or text our parents to tell them what had happened, and that we were okay. Once we were all out, the lady said that she saw what happened and wanted to see what she could do to help. She was in a small car, a car that had some damage to the bumper, but she still stopped, which was incredible of her to do. I wish that I could say the same for the truck that caused all this, but they were long gone. Between the 12 of us kids, we all took turns warming up in the lady's car. She kept it running, and we managed to cram 5 of us in the back seat, one person basically sitting across the lap of the others, and 2 in the passenger seat. The rest of us stood outside, huddled with the adults, who were talking about the incident. Another car came by, which was apparently the woman's husband, and he brought this huge container of hot chocolate for us, and we managed to fit the rest of us in his car. It was still a situation that we didn't want to be in, but at least there was still some good out there. The woman could have kept going, just like the rest. She could have left after making sure that no one was injured. But instead, she stayed with us and even had her husband bring us something to keep us warm. We were out there for a little over an hour before 2 cop cars showed up. They were driving the larger SUVs, and after talking with the adults, they all came up with a plan. Between the 2 cars and 2 cop cruisers, they were going to take us to a safe and warm location first. Then, we just had to wait for a replacement bus to pick us up. With the amount of people in each vehicle, we were all driving slowly. A cop in the front and in back driving with their hazards on. They took the next exit, and we all piled out and into a little restaurant that gave us water and coffee while we waited in the heat. It was nearly 2 hours later when they finally got a new bus for us. One of the cops came back with us and went over things with the adults before we finally got on our new bus. Dave got to sit with the rest of us, as we had another bus driver, and I think that was for the best. He could relax a bit and not have to worry about the rest of the drive, because I know that part of him felt responsible. Mr. Walter did his best to try and lighten the mood by testing us on our song knowledge and getting us to sing the songs. It seemed really cheesy at first, but it worked. And it even loosened Dave up as he started shouting, "Play me some Aerosmith." Even the new bus driver seemed to be enjoying our banter. We finally arrived home around 11 p.m., with all the delays. Apparently, Mr. Walter had all of our phone numbers and had called our parents to let them know what happened, so they were all waiting for us at the school when we got back. We had to leave the bus and all of our equipment behind, so we didn't get our instruments back until around a week later. Amazingly, no one had been seriously injured, only bruises, but I don't think the bus came back. We all got our instruments, but Dylan said that his bus was now a newer one, remembering the seats now being dark blue instead of the dark red they used to be. To my surprise, multiple people witnessed the accident, and including the couple that stayed with us, the person's license plate was captured, and they called it in to report it. I don't know if they ever caught them, though, but I do remember my mom talking about it. Dylan's mom said that the lady told her, and that the operator said multiple people had phoned it in. At least people weren't completely heartless and still called for help for us. So, that was the worst accident that I had ever been in, and while it was terrifying and I learned a very valuable lesson about driving in the snow, I also learned what it meant to help those in need, and that one woman has always stuck with me. I hope what I experienced never happens to anyone else, but if it does, I hope that someone does the same thing for them. Because I know that I would in a heartbeat. That one helpful face can make all of the difference. The story that I'm about to share with you is based on a true event. I considered labeling the story under the category of paranormal because what I saw was extraordinary and unexplainable. But you're about to hear is a spiritual experience that happened randomly, but also felt like it was perfect timing in my life. It all started when I was 19 years young. I worked as a waitress at a Greek restaurant named Olympia. I worked there so often, and I met a lot of new friends and got to know the regular customers of this restaurant pretty well. At this time of my life, I felt so friendly, outgoing, open-minded, and was smiling a lot. And I just wanted to spread peace and positivity to everyone I see. I never judged anyone based off their looks. I smiled at everyone and treated them all the same. Some people even called me a hippie and a free spirit. I had a customer named Michael that once brought me a book called The Power of Now, which is a book all about living in the present moment. Where I was working and grew up, I felt like my age group was into partying and dating, which was not really my interest. And there was not too many good role models and influencers that offered me another alternative way of life that involved being peaceful, healthy, and working on your inner and outer self. So, when Michael gifted me a self-improvement book, I thought, now that's a cool friend. Offering a teenager a book about living more in the present moment, instead of giving me drugs or asking me the question all teenagers dread, what do you want to go to school for, or be when you grow up? Anyways, Michael was one of the few people that stood out to me when I was working there. The location of this restaurant was near a Native American Seneca reservation. I remember this big man would come in to eat, and he stood out to me because he was the first person I saw in my life with a face tattoo. His face tattoo was a giant black bear's claw that covered most of his face. I was his waitress a few times, and I connected with him and his family while at the restaurant. A few months later, I decided to quit my job in New York at the Olympia restaurant in this small town, still being 19. I wanted a change in my life, such as packing my car with everything I owned and driving to California to create a new life, and go to a place that felt more like my vibe. Before leaving on this new big adventure, my friend Bridget invited me and a few other friends to go participate in a sweat lodge on the Seneca reservation. She texted me letting me know to dress a particular way. Being a female, we had to wear long skirts in the lodge, no jewelry, and a shirt that covered our shoulders. When we got there, we all got barefoot, and were handed a small red pouch that was tied shut. It was filled with tobacco, a symbol of protection. We were guided to walk around the fire clockwise and throw this small sack into the fire over our shoulder with a prayer. We lined up to the entrance of this sweat lodge. Men first and women second, oldest to youngest. There was sunlight still out when we went inside, and we were told that we would sit for 3 hours in there. One of my guy friends who came with us looked a bit nervous when they said 3 hours because, for some of our group, this was our first time at a sweat lodge ever. Sitting in there was around 32 people. We sat cross-legged. I was in the front row next to the fire. The door was open, so the light from outside was shining into the lodge. They were bringing hot lava rocks inside with a pitchfork and placing them in the center of the lodge. When I looked up, I saw the same man from the restaurant I used to work at, with the giant black bear claw tattered on his face. He recognized me and he named me Olympia, which was the name of the restaurant that he recognized me from. I thought the name was cool and I felt even more welcomed. Let's name the man with the tattooed face Bear Claw for this story. Bear Claw asked me to hold space for this ceremony and handed me a paper bag filled with cedar and said to continually sprinkle it on the lava rock until it was gone. As I was throwing the cedar, I could smell the sweet fragrance of the forest now in the lodge. He then told the group that he was going to pass around this salve, and we were to place it directly on the crown of our head. The salve was named Bear Balm. He said that this would connect us closer to the spirit world and divine. I am going to note here that I did not smoke, drink, or eat anything, and did not do any drugs that day. This was a totally sober experience. I would close my eyes, breathe, and listen to the drumming and the Native American chants and medicine songs. I now fully assume that Bear Claw was the chief and leader of this lodge. He would guide the English-speaking people to chant the native songs the best they could, even if they didn't know how to pronounce it, just to feel it and to participate. After some time being fully present and open to this sweat lodge and the culture, I opened my eyes to see a deep, dark purple orb floating high above our heads. And then, out of the corner of my eye and now in front of my face, I see a deep, dark emerald green orb flying all around our heads. And then I see two bright, light, playful orbs flying around. They're about the size of my fist. I had no idea what I was looking at because I had never seen something so bright and round flying around. It was not an animal or an insect. It was so real because I could see it when I was opening my eyes, but I couldn't see them when I was closing my eyes. The weirdest thing was that the white orb would come in front of my face directly, and get so close and giggle in a high-pitched voice like, hee 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 hee. Almost like it was being silly and knowing that I could see it, and that I was surprised. And it was having fun, flying circles around my head, and then going up and down and around. I was thinking that the rest of the people were seeing this, and I didn't move. I was sitting still in the meditation posture. It was so incredible to hear and see these orbs flying around me. I think there were 5 total. I remember there being more white light orbs, purple and green, and they all kept flying. They would whisper in my ear. They came to the side of my head and the back of my head, and then they would fly up again, and I was just sitting there watching these orbs, laughing, giggling, and flying around. It seemed like they were getting closer to me than anyone else in the lodge. After we got out of the sweat lodge, I felt like I was rebirthed, and it was now nighttime outside. I was fully drenched in sweat. My clothes were even completely wet that I was wearing, but I didn't feel cold, just refreshed and renewed. When we crawled out of the sweat lodge, I noticed the stars in the sky and the moon was full and completely red, with hints of orange. My friend said that tonight is a strawberry full moon, and that the natives know this full moon because this is the time of the season when you would normally harvest strawberries. After slightly processing what I had just seen, I asked my friend, who was also spiritual and open-minded, if she saw those orbs that were flying around in the sweat lodge as well. I explained to her the colors and what they looked like, and she said no, she didn't see that. Then I asked a few other of my friends that I also came with if they saw the orbs, and they said they did not. After clearly hearing that no one had the same experience as me, I just felt like this was an experience just for me to have. Because I'm open to seeing, experiencing, learning. I'm open-minded to discovering more in life than what we are used to seeing with our naked eyes day to day. As this was a transitional time and what felt like a big step in my life, I felt protected, and that everything would work out, taking that leap of being a teenager and traveling the country by myself. This event happened in the perfect time of my life, because with this new experience, I now realized that you can see some magical and unexplainable energy without doing any sort of drugs or hallucinogenics. And that changed me as a human, and shifted my interest more into spirituality, herbalism, and sweat lodge ceremonies. I'm more inspired to be more open to hearing other people's experiences with the paranormal, glitches in the Matrix, past life stories, etc. I have no doubt now that with those bright small orbs flying around me and presenting themselves to me like they wanted to be noticed, it makes me question a lot, and know that there is more to life. We closed the Sweat Lodge gathering by going inside an apartment. Everyone brought a dish to pass, which we called a potluck. Everyone was very hungry and thirsty from sweating for all those hours, but before we dived into the food, there was a person who took one plate and added a little bit of each food that everyone had brought. They made a plate for the spirits to eat before us. The person with the paper plate of food brought it to the burning fire that earlier we had walked around by the sweat lodge, and then burned the food in the fire, saying that the spirit of the fire ate before us, and after that they had a long pipe filled with tobacco, and they passed it around to each person. But not everybody would smoke this, and also myself, who did not smoke and did not want to in this one, we were told to just tap it on our right shoulder, our left shoulder, and then up to our third eye, the center of our brows. Then pass it along. This was a symbol of peace and unity. Then, after eating, we all went home. A random part of the story that I remember, I met an elder who was not wearing a shirt and had jean shorts, and he wore turquoise rings on each of his fingers, and had 2 turtle shells tattooed on each of his kneecaps. They called him Turtle Man. I thought he was interesting. Anyway, even now at 28 years young, I know this story shapes who I am today. I shared the story to some people who I felt would understand or have an explanation, but to this day, I do not have an explanation, or logical reason for why that happened. When I studied yoga in Costa Rica, I tried asking one of the elders there if she knew what these orbs meant. She said that they could be chakras, which are energy wheels, different colors symbolizing different energy centers in our body that need to be balanced, or are extremely amplified. I still don't 100% know why these orbs came to me. I do know that it was a magical experience, and now I know that energy is real, seen and unseen, in my perspective. Hi, this is my first experience with the paranormal. First of many. I was 16, so it was about 12 years ago. I was clubbing with my older cousins in a country where they had kids' nightclubs where they sold alcohol and cigarettes to kids. My cousin had offered me a cigarette. Not that I ever wanted to smoke, but I gave in due to peer pressure. As I inhaled and began to cough my lungs out, in the darkness behind a tree, I saw a figure's head staring at me. I didn't think too much of it because it was dark and maybe he was just peeing on the tree. A week went by, and this is when I started seeing things. I was hiding my newfound smoking habit from my parents, and only having a smoke if they were gone, or if I was out for a walk or they were asleep. I went to the back of our house, where we were halfway through building a granny flat. I took a seat on the inside of the door so I was hidden and lit up. I was texting on my phone, and I noticed a light, very drastically being shaken around. So I dropped the smoke and squished it out while looking through the window towards the light. That's where I saw a black figure running with a lantern. I start to turn around to look out the door, and I see no one. No light, no figure, just darkness. I was wondering if it was our neighbor. Our houses were about 50 meters away from each other, but each had about 3,000 square meters of land apiece. We also used to visit each other by going around the back of the houses, as there was a little gate for easy access. I looked out the door and called out my neighbor's name. There was no answer. I started getting freaked out, and as I was about to start heading into the house, I heard a noise, like leaves rustling and a low growl. My brain just kicked into overdrive and said, "Did you forget the wolves make their way into the village at night?" So I ran, thinking it was a wolf and saving myself, forgetting all about the figure. I climbed into bed, and that's when I remembered the figure. I couldn't figure out who it would have been other than my neighbor. Fast forward about a week, and I'm on the balcony on the top floor of the house having another smoke. I look into the distance and I see a light again. I saw it. The figure was there again. I should mention now that my parents were at our neighbor's, and as I'm focusing on the figure, then suddenly I hear, "The hell are you doing?" And my mom screamed it from the darkness. And this time they decided to come around the front of the house, having to pass the figure. After realizing it's my parents, I dropped the cigarette behind me while barefoot and stepped back directly onto it, burning the bottom of my foot. An argument ensued about my new habit, but at the end, I asked them who was the dark figure. They looked at me funny and said that they didn't see anyone. They didn't see the figure, and this started to freak me out. They're very religious, and decided to take me to a white mage to get rid of this apparent spirit. That didn't last, as not even 3 days after the visit to the white mage, the figure returned. Late at night, I was having another smoke outside. My parents didn't care that much at this point about the smoking. This is when I saw the figure again, this time closer to me and the house, standing maybe 50 meters from me, and the lantern was only illuminating the ground around the figure, but only pitch black remained of said figure. I asked, "Who are you?" And there was no response, just silence. I started to step back, keeping my eyes on the figure, and as soon as I'm close to the house, I run. My parents see me running and ask why I was running. I didn't tell them that I saw the figure, as during the argument, they mentioned that I'd be sent to an insane asylum if the white mage didn't work. That same night, I was asleep in bed when I had a dream. My grandparents were looking at me from the side like I was in a hospital bed, starting with my grandparents, grandma, dad, mom, and sister in that order, telling me to go outside. Kind of like one appearing on one side and disappearing before the next appears on the other, telling me to go outside. Then, in a raspy, horrible voice from above me, a dark figure appears and tells me the same. That's when I woke up. I didn't go outside, but I looked out the window. Everything was pitch black. The only thing that was different that I could see is anything that should have been organic, like grass and trees. It was all dark purple. That's when I see the white light below me. I look down and I see the figure. I close the blinds and run into bed, covering myself completely, and I didn't sleep that night. So I got up absolutely exhausted. Skip forward a month, with nothing but a few restless nights. It was finally time for bed. I fell asleep with no issues. But I awoke just after midnight to see the light on. I got up and saw the dark figure, standing at my feet. It moves its hand to its mouth area, and I hear a shh sound. I was too scared to move, let alone make a noise. The figure pointed to my smokes, and as I looked over at them, he vanished, like smoke. I didn't sleep for like a week after that, but it was also the last time I saw the figure, and I took to calling him the Lantern Looker. I wonder if I'll ever see him again. This was my first real experience with the paranormal, but there are many more, so if people want to hear more, I'm happy to submit them. This, strangely enough, took place at a bachelorette party. My friend Avery got engaged in 2019 and originally planned to get married in 2020. Due to unforeseen circumstances, they decided to hold off on it, wanting to have a large ceremony, and they wanted everyone to be comfortable with it. So finally, they had set a day in 2022, and some serious planning was in play. I was to be her maid of honor, so I helped with a lot of the planning. One of the things I got to help with and was excited for was her bachelorette party. Instead of the typical bar hopping and wild night downtown, she wanted something more low-key. She wanted to do an adult sleepover in a sense. She would have a normal party for the day, and then she invited a few of us close to her and/or in the wedding to stay overnight at her parents' holiday home. They moved further south, but they kept their old house to stay in at the winter, or when they came to visit her and her siblings. They told her she could use it for her party, and she was even more ecstatic because it was her childhood home. I even stayed nights there with her when we were younger. And there were 6 of us in total: Avery, our mutual friends Joy and Robin, Avery's sister-in-law, Margaret, and a girl that Avery worked with named Tanya. I knew Joy and Robin, of course. I had met Margaret a few times, and she was also super chill, and we loved hanging out with her. Avery said that she had become the little sister that she never had. And Tanya? I only met her once, but she seemed nice too. Avery obviously liked her enough to not only invite her to the wedding, but even the party. She got along with everyone and clicked well with our personalities. In fact, it felt like we had known each other for years, and we just hadn't seen each other for years. The plan was to drink a lot of cheap wine, eat, talk, play games, and open presents. We made dinner together as we played songs from our childhood and judged each other. We had started playing a rowdy game of Never Have I Ever, with shots of wine, when Tanya kept getting distracted by her phone. We were all adults, and she probably still had responsibilities, so no big deal. And that's when she interrupted, apologizing, but she said that her boyfriend lived nearby, and asked Avery if he could stop by to give her a charger for her phone because she forgot hers. Avery said that was fine, so she ran outside, excusing herself. We continued with our game, and Tanya came back in about 20 minutes with a bag in hand. Sure, it took a while, but they were probably talking or something. It wasn't anything that we found too weird. The night continued, and we moved on to opening presents. It was all the normal gag gifts and some fun ones, but once again, I noticed Tanya constantly being on her phone. But I would notice a change in her expression as she looked at her phone, more like she was concentrating or upset. Then, when she put her phone away, she would look up and smile and laugh like everything was normal. A bit strange, but again, I chalked it up to it being a serious conversation that she was involved in. But then she would excuse herself and walk outside, as she put her phone up to her ear. Avery said that she didn't have any kids, so I assumed maybe it was a fight with her boyfriend or something. I just thought at least she was nice enough to walk away to not make things awkward. Whatever the situation, I felt bad for her, but it was also none of my business. It was around midnight. A lot of our energy was low, and we had all settled into the living room, just trying to find something to watch. I followed Avery into the kitchen to get some sweets for us at her request. And that's when she asked me how I felt about Tanya. At first, I said that she seemed fine, but then Avery asked very specifically about how she was acting, and confirmed that she was noticing the same thing. She said she didn't mind her being on her phone or stepping away for the calls, but was more concerned by how upset she looked. She even said that when she went to the bathroom, which was by the front door, she could hear her talking and heard her say, "Because I don't want to, not tonight." She was concerned if she needed to do something or leave. Maybe she was being told to do something and she didn't want to. I agreed that it was strange, but I was at a loss on how we would even bring it up, or even if we should. We brought in a tray of different snacks, and Avery stopped to take a moment and thanked us all for coming out for her silly sleepover. But then she also said that she wouldn't be upset if anyone had to leave, now or early, and that she wouldn't kick anyone out of the wedding if they did. And we all laughed. I paid attention to Tanya, who smiled at the comment, but the laugh seemed weak and insincere. Margaret made a joke to bring the moods back up, and we finally decided on a movie to watch. But throughout the entire movie, Tanya had her phone out and even left the room a few times. After the movie, Joy and Robin said that they were tired, and Avery told them that they could take her old room, and they headed off. We were going to start another movie, and about halfway through, Tanya said she was going to head to bed too. I remember looking at her to wish her a good night, and her eyes looked watery, like she was going to cry. I finally butted in and asked her if everything was okay, trying to look genuinely worried for her. She smiled and said she was fine and just really tired. Avery pushed the subject too, and asked if she was okay or if she needed anything, but she once again said that she was fine, and thanked her for the invite. Avery showed her the spare bedroom, and then we continued with the movie. At some point during the movie, Margaret passed out on the couch, so we left her alone. I agreed to take the other couch so Avery could have the last bedroom, her parents' room. After the movie ended, she shuffled into the room and I got myself set up on the couch. I was starting to drift off when I heard a thud that woke me up. I looked around and didn't immediately see anything, so I lied back down, not wanting to get up from my position. I drifted back off. I don't know how long I was out after that, but I was jolted awake when I heard screaming. Margaret and I both looked back towards the bedrooms, but we were frozen in place. Then we heard a bunch of shuffling and more screaming. We both jumped from the couch. I grabbed my phone and Margaret by the arm and motioned toward the kitchen. The garage door was through there, and my only thought was to go somewhere they were less likely to check. We ran quickly and silently, as I tried to peek down the hallway. The light was on in the room that Joy and Robin were in, and I could see shadows on the wall, but that was it. Once in the garage, I called 911, who said that there were already cops en route. At the time, I was relieved. I didn't think about it until I had more time to think about it, but I didn't know who managed to call before we had. We waited in the garage, and I asked Margaret if she thought we should go check on the others, but she said no. The chances of us being able to help if the four of them couldn't help themselves was not looking good in our favor. I felt awful, and I knew Margaret did too. All we could do was wait and hope that they weren't injured. The police seemed to get there a lot faster than I expected, and I could hear shouting at someone to get on the ground. That's when we opened the door and stood in the kitchen. I saw 3 cops in the hallway, 2 on the floor holding someone down, the third cop standing behind them. They turned and saw us and asked who we were. We explained who we all were and why we were there. We then asked if the rest of them were okay, and they said yes. And that's about when the other two started walking some guy out in dark pants and a hoodie, handcuffed. I had never seen that man in my life. Avery, Joy, and Robin all came out looking distraught with tears in their eyes. We all sat in the living room and gave statements as we all noticed the same thing. Tanya was not around. I feared something had happened to her, but no one was saying anything. Until we all actually started giving our statements. We all brought up Tanya and the fact that she was supposed to be in one of the rooms, and we asked where she was. The cops said that they only saw the three of them in the rooms and no one else. Two of the officers did another sweep around the house and the outside, and still she was nowhere to be found. They even said all the cars were accounted for. Joy and Robin rode together. Avery picked up Margaret in her car, and my car was out there. But Tanya's was not. It was like she was never there that night. The covers weren't even pulled down like she was in the bed. None of us could explain it. Only one guy was seen in cots, so it's not like she was abducted. The only thing that made sense was that she left without telling anyone. Was it because of her calls and texts from earlier that night? Did she decide to leave without telling us, maybe due to embarrassment? Did she just get extremely lucky with her timing? At the time, I was just hoping she was okay. But then, we soon learned that the break-in and Tanya's leaving was, in fact, related. Avery caught me up after going over it all with the police. She had gotten a long text from Tanya apologizing for everything. She said that she wanted out of the life that she was living, and that she truly had a great night with us. She said that she never intended to plan a hit on our party because she truly enjoyed our company, but she said that her life was threatened. So, she said she had to leave before anyone showed up, fearing Malcolm, Tanya's boyfriend, more than the police. But she also knew that we would be okay since she had tipped them off about it. Apparently, the police got there so fast because Tanya had called in and reported a break-in at the house before they even got there. Malcolm was apparently Tanya's boyfriend, and he was very controlling and abusive. He used her to get close to other people, and then would use that as an opportunity to rob them. We were not supposed to be involved, but once he showed up unannounced, because she was required to tell him where she was going to be, he wanted something out of it, because the house looked nice. When she refused, he threatened to hurt her and us, so she finally gave in. However, she left, called it in, and then turned herself in the next day. She got all this from the cop who brought Avery in the next day. She said that she had sent her the text before she turned herself in. Shocked is not a strong enough word to describe my thoughts. Avery knew Tanya from work, and she said she was a very typical coworker. Avery was Tanya's mentor when she started, and she said she was always a hard worker. She was rarely late or missed a day. She caught on quickly and never got in any trouble. Avery is a manager, so she would see the corrective actions. She never gave off any weird vibes or acted suspicious either, so she even found it hard to believe that this was all real. Tanya and her boyfriend had been doing this for years, and it obviously aided her enough that she turned herself in. They had found duct tape, zip ties, and a knife on Malcolm, and if he was planning on using that all on us, I can't imagine the things he had done to others, possibly complete strangers. I know he ended up in prison for the robberies, and thanks to Tanya, they were able to tie them to several previous ones. I read that Tanya was doing time too, but it was less due to her cooperation. From then on, I've honestly had a weird paranoia about meeting new people. I thought I knew her well enough, Avery especially, but you really have no idea what's going on behind closed doors. Hi, Raven. I'm a follower of Christ, but at one point in my life, I was a staunch atheist, or at the very least, agnostic. I'm a scientist in a neuroscience PhD program, so I've often been skeptical of spiritual things, but I wanted to share the story that made me sincerely change my perspective and had me look hard at my life. My entire life, I've lived with bouts of sleep paralysis. A side story that comes to mind is when I had dreamt of a young lady who tried drugs at a party in a cabin in the woods and overdosed. No one helped her, and the rest of the partiers left when they realized she'd OD'd. I woke from that dream in a sleep paralysis state, and the girl from my dream with dark long hair and pale skin was at my bedside. She was wrapped in pieces of cloth to conceal her decay, but she was caressing my arm and asking me to help her in soft whispers. Talk about scary. So, needless to say, I have extremely vivid dreams that are often filled with lifelike realities. But this story that I want to tell you was different from the other sleep paralysis or nightmares I've had. It forever changed me, and it often takes a lot of courage for me to talk about it. I wanted to try to face it today by writing it to you as a sort of exposure therapy. My husband and I fell asleep one night over the summer. It was a night like any other. We showered, talked, and then hit the lights to sleep. When I started to dream, however, an awful vision came to me. I was in a clinical-looking room. All white walls, white tiled floors, and a single dim LED light bulb above me. I was sitting on a cold metal chair, and in front of me was a large metal slab that appeared to be a table. I was shaking and nervous. Across the table sat a figure. I could barely make out its features since the backlight of the bulb was essentially blocking out its face, but I could feel it staring at me intently. I didn't have to say a word the entire time. This figure began to talk to me. I'm going to do my best to summarize what this figure said to me, but I want people to know that it was far more intense and scarier than what I could find the words to describe in this post. They think I am like the symbols they poke fun with, the figure said in a monotone robotic voice. That I am like the goat's head and silly devil with horns. The figure moved closer to me now, leaning across the table, and I could now see its face, or rather lack of a face. The figure looked like a plastic mannequin, lifeless, without any eyes, just soulless and gaping. Its skin was perfect, but clearly had no pores or any identifiable moles or wrinkles. Its lack of eyes was what unsettled me, just blackened tunnels that pierced into my soul. And its voice was hollow, like it was playing a voice recording that had been twisted and mixed in a raucous chorus. They think I'm the personification of evil, it said now, unfazed and showing no emotions. That I have vengeance and drive to do harm, but the truth is not that I am bad, said the figure, not moving a single muscle. It is that I lack a soul. I sat there now, not saying anything, and I could feel myself having a panic attack. My ears were thumping, and my heart felt that dreadful icy sensation. That feeling when you know something horrible has happened. It was so quiet in this room, so suffocating. I was aware that I was in a dream, but I couldn't do anything to end it. I was forced to be in this vision with this figure. I harvest you, said the figure, and the only thing that gives me life is taking your emotions and splitting you from your soul. It doesn't matter if they're good emotions like joy or bad emotions like rage. I want all of them. I harvest them all when you're not protected. Whether it is from when you sin in your anger or sin in your pleasure, I take you no matter what. At this point, I was crying. The tears were streaming down my face, but the figure's face kept inching closer to my own, and I couldn't look away. I am the void, is what it parted with, and that phrase forever stuck with me. I am the void, it repeated. And then its bottom jaw fell, elongated and wide, and inside its warped mouth I saw razor-sharp teeth and a literal void, which appeared to look like space itself. This figure began to tug me towards its mouth, but I screamed and pushed it away, though I knew nothing was saving me. It began gnashing at my nose like some vicious dog, and I cried out to God. It was foreign to call out to God, as I've said, I was an atheist at this point in my life. But when I called to him, the dream ended abruptly. In my half-sleep, half-wake state, I sprung out of our bed and literally ran to the other side of the room. Amid the craziness, I was crying, screaming, and shouting for the figure to go away. I was on my hands and knees in tears, still in a hazy dream state. I was crying so hard that I actually vomited, which is gross, I know. This obviously woke up my husband, who was now beside me trying to console me and figure out what the heck I was doing. I must have cried for an entire hour. I was rocking myself like a literal baby, in so much fear and pain. I was never the same after that experience, and it totally changed me as a person. Luckily, there is a happy ending. A few months later, after healing my trauma and opinions from past negative church experiences, I gave my life to Christ, who I believe had shown me that vision for a reason. I'm now living a wonderful life, and have never had a nightmare since that day, many years ago now. I know it sounds crazy, but I felt compelled to share this with you and your audience, since I know you all are chill, accepting people on this channel. Thank you for giving us a platform to share such experiences that we normally wouldn't be able to. I felt compelled to share this story after listening to the abundance of strangers relay their own odd and quite creepy stories. Mine's a rather short one, and flashes back to when me and my best friend, Casey, both female, were around 13 or 14. For context, we're both currently 30, a number that is hard to type and even harder to comprehend. To give some background, my friends and I were silly, and loved to create our own fun. By fun, I mean we really enjoyed messing with people in more harmless ways. We would take walks around my Maryland neighborhood and pretend to get into odd-looking fights, just to get the reactions from not-so-well-known neighbors. We would do prank calls to our teachers, would purposely have fake, weird, and shocking conversations amongst each other out in public, just to have some laughs between ourselves later. The year would have been around 2009, and during that time, chat rooms were more of a popular thing. Or, at least, seemingly so. We were having a sleepover one night, although we didn't sleep much during those nights. We tended to be night owls, either pulling all-nighters or staying up to the wee hours of the morning. We decided to enter a chat room and attempt to talk to a random person in an attempt to mess with them slightly. Again, in such a fashion that we just make ourselves look like fools. I don't recall the website, but it was just a basic chat room. We started chatting with this one guy who we'll call Joe. He was normal enough, as we asked roundabout questions. As we messaged back and forth, we attempted to answer in the most peculiar way, perhaps like an old English lad, or pretending we didn't understand a very common word or phrase, just acting a bit foolish. After some time, Joe started asking odder questions. At my age now, of course, I wouldn't enter a chat room to talk to a random person. You just never know. But at a young age, it doesn't always seem threatening. He started asking too personal of questions. Inappropriate questions. We ourselves started to feel creeped out. It wasn't until he asked, "Do you feel scared?" and "Am I weirding you out?" It's fuzzy now how the exact conversation went, but it started as some laughs to feelings of dread. The questions this Joe guy was asking, we felt threatened enough that we quickly ended the chat and turned off the computer. Some time had passed and we were still on edge about how the conversation quickly escalated with Joe. At this point, it's probably 2 or 3 in the morning. I noticed light seeping into the front of the house that isn't usually there. Casey and I go have a look, and we see a car sitting idling, with its headlights on, sitting right at the end of our driveway. I lived with my parents in a neighborhood, but all the houses were slightly spread out, with a decent amount of land in between. There weren't too many houses down where we were at the end of the street. So for a car to even be driving, let alone parked in front of our driveway, it was not in any way usual. We lived tucked back in a neighborhood, in a more rural area. It couldn't be someone lost. There were no main roads near us. Everyone in the house, besides ourselves, were asleep. We were thoroughly scared, and we cursed ourselves for even entering that chat room. The car continued to eerily sit there with its beams directly facing the house. We had 911 dialed and ready to call on our phone. We hung out blankets over the top of the windows and the glass sliding door that didn't have curtains. I desperately wanted to get my parents, but then would have to admit my guilt of talking to a creepy man on the internet for fun. The car sat there for a good 15 minutes at least. We were truly terrified and weren't sure what to do. It finally began to slowly back up. It just circled and slowly left. To this day, I don't know who it was. All I can tell you is that we were convinced it was the chat room creep, Joe. I'm not a tech-savvy person, and I don't know how it would be possible to locate someone's location from a chat room, but what I do know is we were the ones to get played that night, and yet we got so lucky. Needless to say, we have not entered a chat room since. When one of my favorite games came out back in 2016, I became obsessed with everything about it. I even joined Facebook groups to share my experiences, the good and the bad, get the heads up on possible leaks, and maybe even find some others to play it with. While watching a streamer who played the same game, I learned from people in the chat about a community Discord server dedicated to the game, and I thought it would be fun to join too. Everyone was cool there. I even recognized a few people from the chat, and one of them that regularly posted in the Facebook group that I was in. It seemed very similar, except the Discord was definitely more organized, so you could ignore certain parts of it, like those that took the game way too seriously, or the, quote, angry room, where they just constantly complained about the game. I actually quite enjoyed checking it out. This is also where I met Trevor. It's not his real name, I'm sure, but it's what he went by. He seemed normal at first. Funny, good at the game, quite active in the server, and always willing to help newer players improve. We actually played in the same group for about 2 weeks before he sent me a friend request, which I accepted, without really thinking about it. It was on Discord, so I knew I could just remove him, no problem, if I had to. But he really didn't act weird. He never said anything that could be remotely misconstrued as off-putting, so I had no problems with it. We started chatting privately about different games, music, and other normal daily stuff like our pets. He told me that he was 28, I was 26 at the time, and where he worked, which was just a few hours from where I lived. He seemed genuinely interested in my life, but never pushed for personal information, which also made me feel comfortable talking to him. After about a month of regular gaming sessions and talking, Trevor mentioned how he was going to a work conference in my city, and asked if I wanted to meet up to get coffee, since he wasn't familiar with the area, and that we should since we'd become such good friends. I remember thinking, we just play some games together. You know my cat's name in the city I live in. I wouldn't consider that to be a great friend, but I was nice because, still, he wasn't being weird. I just politely declined, saying I preferred to keep my gaming stuff online, at least for right now. I also didn't want to feel like I was leading him on or anything. I'm not straight, so I know I wasn't showing any interest in him. Anyway, he seemed to take it pretty well, saying that he totally understood, and I even gave him a suggestion on where to get some good local coffee. But while I thought we both handled that well, things started changing. The next day, he had messaged me about a weird coincidence. He'd found my Instagram account, he claimed, through mutual followers. I hadn't told him anything past my first name or any of my socials. Those I kept for people I knew personally. Yes, I followed some people on Insta, and was involved in some Facebook groups, but I also didn't have my Facebook and Instagram connected. He also specifically called out Instagram, not Facebook, so it wasn't the gaming group that I was in. My name on Instagram is also a play on my middle name, so not even my first name. My only thoughts were that he had to be purposefully and actively looking for me. I couldn't really get behind the idea of it being a coincidence. So this definitely set off some minor alarm bells. I was honest and to the point, and told him that that was quite the coincidence, but that I didn't accept any follow requests for people I didn't personally know, and even mentioned that it was due to a weird random follower situation. He once again said that he understood, and we dropped it. But then, a few hours after that, he sent me an invite to join him on Snapchat. He followed it up with, if I wanted to talk outside of Discord. At this point, I was a bit irritated. This was the third attempt to talk to me outside of the server, and I've declined the other offers. I understand he may have just been being friendly, and even friendships can cross boundaries, but that still does not make it okay. So I confronted him about it. I told him I wasn't interested in talking outside of the server, and that I was uncomfortable with all of his attempts. He took a while to finally respond, and when he did, it was a simple apology saying he didn't mean to send the snap request to me. I honestly did not believe him, but that's fine. If he claimed he didn't, then it shouldn't happen again anyways, now that he knew how I felt, right? Instead of accepting my feelings and wishes, however, he doubled down on the creepiness. He started sending me messages about specific places I had been to recently, places that I never mentioned in a public setting. He asked me about a restaurant that I went to and would always phrase it as if he had no idea. Hey, I saw this Thai place around X Street. Do you know if they make this? Or when I stopped at a small market near my work. The farmer's market at this intersection has awesome street corn. He worked a few hours from me, so I assumed he also lived that far from me. Why would he be shopping around in places near me? The conference was one day, so I didn't understand. But the fact that he would ask these questions after I would leave these places made me feel like he was intimidating me. Like he was trying to prove a point. It was such a strange thing to do, and I hated it. We started out just talking to each other and sharing mutual interests in a video game, but now, somehow, he knew where I was throughout the day. And at that point, I was no longer comfortable going to places I would normally go. So, I ended up just leaving the server, and removing him as a friend on Discord, and then blocked him. I wanted nothing more to do with him. However, I then started getting friend requests on Discord from new accounts with no mutual servers or friends. And when those were all declined, then I got more follow requests and friend requests on Facebook and Instagram. I declined all of those too, but he was persistent. One day, my sister showed up at my place unannounced and was asking if I was okay. Confused, I told her I was fine and didn't know what she was talking about. She said that she got a message on Facebook from some guy named Trevor, claiming to be a work friend. He told her that I had been acting strange and that he was worried about me, asking if she could check on me since I hadn't been to work in a few days, which prompted her to rush over. My confusion quickly turned to pure anger, as I asked her to show me the message, and sure enough, it was the same guy. His PFP was of himself in some cosplay, and several of his Instagram and Facebook pages had similar pictures. I knew it was him. So, I told my sister everything that was happening, and she was worried that he was following me. I definitely had a feeling that that was happening, because how else did he know where I went daily? But I had no way of proving it, really. The messages, maybe, but that was it. And I wasn't aware that he would be around or didn't think about it when I was out, so I rarely looked for him. But as we considered this, something told me to look outside. I live in an apartment, with my place facing the parking lots out front. I looked around and spotted a car in the parking lot that was running, and I saw him, sitting in the car, looking around left and right. I knew it was him. If he'd been following me to those places previously, there was a high chance he followed me home too. So he probably knew the building I was in, but maybe he didn't know which apartment. What if he had lured my sister to my place to watch and see? I was livid. I wanted to storm out there right at that moment and chew him out, but my sister stopped me. She suggested that I call the police instead. Ultimately, I knew she was right, and I did call. I was surprised by how quickly they showed up, and with the way they pulled in, because I gave them a description of his car. They blocked him so he couldn't even try to leave. We watched from the window as they asked him to step out. They patted him down and were then talking to him. One of the cops came up to my apartment, and we went over all the details again. I was smart. I took screenshots of all the conversations on Discord before I blocked him, so they could see his picture too. It was small, but the cop I talked to said he was confident it was the same guy. We waited inside for a bit until another cop came up, the one that was previously talking to Trevor, asking again for my side of the story. That's when he told me what Trevor had told them. He claimed to be waiting there for a friend, but when they asked for the friend's name and unit, he seemed to be trying to think of answers off the top of his head. He said that his friend lived upstairs, but couldn't give the exact unit or even floor. There were 4 floors. I gave them a description of some of the people in the building that I knew, but after checking with the front office, they confirmed that no one lived there by the name that he had given. After all was said and done, he was actually arrested, because he apparently had warrants. But I was given the option to file a protective order, and yes, I did just that. Why would you stalk someone when you have warrants? When someone could easily call the cops on you? None of this made any sense. After this event, I didn't get any more messages from him. Friend requests, nothing. So maybe he got the hint. Maybe whatever his warrants were for kept him busy. All I know is that he ruined something that was really fun for me. I did stay in one Facebook group, but removed myself from any other ones and just stuck with the friends I had made previously. I had tried to put myself out there more, and that was obviously a mistake. I still don't know what his true intentions were, and I guess it's best that I never know. so long as he is never able to achieve them, whether it's with me or someone else. As a young girl, I had friends over and sleepovers quite often. I loved gathering with a group of friends and just doing whatever we felt like that night. Not to mention all the inside jokes that came out of those nights. The thought that we knew something that no one at school would understand was a great feeling to me at the time. But there was one night that stood out from the rest that I want to tell you about now. It was my 13th birthday, and after my party, I was allowed to have a sleepover with up to 4 friends. After we all got settled for the night, my parents said they were going to go out for a few hours, leaving my friends and I to be watched by my 17-year-old sister. She basically stayed in her room and left us alone, even though she wasn't obnoxious or anything. I think she just preferred to be in her room talking to her friends on the landline, or maybe in the computer room. Either way, it meant that we practically had the house to ourselves, and I was excited. I was a preteen now and felt cool and independent. That night consisted of myself, my friends Jade, Ciara, Mel, and Megan. My parents ordered pizza for us before they left, so we devoured that. We watched some cheesy movies, gossiped about school, did our hair and makeup, and then had a silly fashion show on the back deck, wearing each other's clothes. My sister even let us borrow some of her scarves and dresses. We were all just having a genuine blast doing the typical girl stuff. Around 11 p.m., we finally decided to pull out the air mattress and set it up in the living room, moving the coffee table and pushing back the chairs and couch. To give a little bit of the setup of the room, because it is relevant, the wall with the front door has a wide window on it. There's a cushioned rocking chair and a recliner against that wall with a table in between them. The opposite wall has a half wall that you could see into the kitchen. The couch was also against this wall. The west wall was where the TV was, as well as a few wall decorations, including a clock and large decorative window. The east wall didn't have much to it. There was a small closet and a side table where we usually put our purses and backpacks. Then the hallway to the bedrooms. Once we got the mattress set up, we all sat on it and continued talking about whatever came to mind. I think it was all the excitement and soda we drank, but we seemed to be pretty wired. I last looked up at the clock when it was 2 a.m., and we were talking about making popcorn. We were debating on popcorn or just pulling the pizza back out. As we talked, I heard a gasp from Megan, and we looked at her, and I just remember how all the color drained from her face. She was staring up at the wall, and I followed her gaze to see what she was seeing. At first I thought it was the clock. Maybe she was surprised by just how late it was. Until I saw the movement in the mirror that caught my attention. There in the mirror, it was reflecting the sliding door in the kitchen. The door that was slightly opened, and a single long arm was reaching in and running up and down the wall, like it was trying to find something. A light switch, maybe? We all stared for several seconds at this sight, frozen in fear. There were no adults home, and my parents certainly wouldn't be coming in from the back door. Jade whispered to me what we should do, and they all started talking about what if the person sees us or runs in. I don't know what came over me, but I slowly stood up, motioning to my friends to be quiet, and I approached the kitchen. I remember my heart beating so fast. I could feel it in my ears. I walked towards the slider, and once I reached the handle, I realized the person was facing away from the door, like their back was to it, and they were still waving their arm around against the wall. Then I grabbed the handle and quickly shoved it closed. The sound that came out of the man sounded inhuman, and he screamed and tried to pull his arm out. I pushed harder against the door, and I swear I heard a crack. And that's about the time my friends started screaming too. I yelled at them to get my sister, and Jade came over and helped push on the door. As my sister came running down, she grabbed the phone from the kitchen and, I assumed, called 911. I heard another sickening pop sound, and the man let out one last scream and managed to get his arm out. We slammed the door shut and locked it. I was on high alert at this point, and my hands were shaking uncontrollably. I shut the curtains that were on the slider and ran around, making sure the windows and front door were locked too. Then my sister yelled at me to call Dad. The computer room had another landline that was on its own line, so I went to it and called my parents, telling them what had happened. I honestly don't remember who got there faster, because I remember them all running up to the door at the same time. They all asked us what happened, and I do remember how surprised the cop was when I told him what I did. It was a terrifying situation, but my fight or flight mode kicked in, and it told me to fight. He was impressed. I remember him even having a quick chuckle, like he was amused that the little 13-year-old girl did all that. It was a nice moment of relief between all the horror of what just played out. They checked out the back door, and they found several cigarette butts, but no one in my house smokes. And then they found what looked like the top part of a butter knife. I remember the cop explaining to my parents how they had seen something similar used in home invasions. They basically left it in the sliding doors or some windows, and that would prevent the latch from catching, so they could easily open it back up. That was pretty terrifying for me. We had been out on the patio because it was long, using it as our catwalk. Was he out there watching us at that point? After all was said and done, they didn't catch the guy that night and didn't see anyone in the area, so they left us after taking a report. My parents let us continue our party in my room, and they stayed in the living room that night. My sister even joined us after that. We were probably up until about 5 a.m. before we finally fell asleep. Thankfully, my parents let us sleep in, and we all woke up around noon. Still pretty tired, but none of us could sleep anymore. It was kind of awkward that morning, but thankfully, my friends didn't shun me after that. They actually thought what I did was pretty cool and brave, which did make me feel better. When my friends' parents all came to pick them up, my mom told them all what had happened, and all the parents were just as shocked and impressed. I was also thankful they didn't ban them from coming over anymore. I heard my mom tell Jade's mom that they actually caught the guys, so after they were all gone, I asked her about it. She confirmed that they did catch him, and I was instantly relieved. Not only did I stop something worse from possibly happening, he was also arrested, so I didn't have to fear him returning. A few years later, my parents explained a bit more about what had happened with the guy. Apparently, he went to the hospital, because his arm became pretty useless and swollen. I had managed to shatter his elbow, and with how he pulled his arm, he dislocated it and tore some skin. It was pretty hard to lie about since the cops were already looking for a guy with a messed up arm, and called the local hospitals to inform them too. Thankfully, they paid attention, and reported it. So from then on, my parents and sister teased me about staying away from men and doors. I'm still impressed with what I did that night, even now as an adult, because I'm not sure if I would do the same. That just goes to show, you should never underestimate what kids are capable of. But truly, I also thank Megan, because she was the first one to notice him, and I don't know what would have happened if she hadn't noticed. I've listened to the podcast for a while now and decided to share my story. Once I was sleeping in my bed, but then I woke up. The sun was rising a little, but it was still dark. I was still very tired. I looked behind me at the headboard when I saw a long hand coming out from behind it. It was this long hand and it was all black. It was like a shadow except darker. Since I was tired, I wasn't thinking about it much, so I whacked at it, and then it quickly went under the bed. And then I fell back asleep. When I woke up a little later, the sun had risen more. It was almost day, and my mom was also awake in the bed beside me lying down. "Is there something on my head?" my mom asked. I looked at her head and I saw the black hand touching it. I was more awake and energetic now. I decided to whack at it again, and then it quickly went back under the bed. My mom asked me why I hit her, and I told her about the long black hand. And all she said was, "Okay." I don't know what it was, but I think I saw a shadow person. For most of 2015, I dated this guy named Enrique. We met each other from school and we were both in the 10th grade. It was a toxic relationship and he was very abusive and controlling. I tried breaking up with him many different times, but he would blackmail me. My father managed to put an end to our relationship. I don't know how he did it, but he must have threatened Enrique in a way that I can only imagine that it was beyond scarier than a horror movie. This didn't really solve anything, though. When in school, he would stare at me in class, and he would follow me around almost everywhere for about like a week, or a week and a half after our breakup. I decided that I would go to my friends for help, and they in fact did help me. I had like 3 or 4 friends walk with me wherever I went, and this did the trick, but only for a short amount of time. One Friday night, I went over to my friend Mary's house for a sleepover. We ordered pizza, watched a movie, and gossiped about other kids in our school. At around 12:30, we went upstairs to Mary's room and we were getting ready to go to bed. I was going to sleep in the same bed as her because her house only had 3 other bedrooms, which were a guest bedroom, which was off limits at the time due to reconstruction, her parents' bedroom, who were out of town that whole week, and her twin brother's room, which he was also at a friend's house on the same exact night. I got dressed into my PJs, brushed my teeth, turned off the light, and shut Mary's bedroom door. A split second after I shut the door, I heard the glass of the window downstairs being shattered. Before either of us could say anything, we heard a voice from downstairs say, "I know you're here, Sherry. You thought you could hide from me, but you're wrong." I knew this voice very well. It was Enrique's voice. How did he even know that I was here if every shade in Mary's house was down? Was he following us? That could be possible. Without any second thought, we both went into the closet that was right next to Mary's bed. We found a drawer in the closet that had enough space to crawl behind, and both of us hid there. As we were hiding, we heard Enrique open every door every 15 to 20 seconds, as he was most likely going through each room to see where we were hiding. We then heard his loud footsteps come upstairs. The first door he opened upstairs was the room that we were in. I remembered that it didn't have a lock on it. Enrique entered the room. You know when you say something accidentally at the wrong time? Well, that's what I did. As we were still in the closet, we heard Enrique sneeze. I don't know what came of me at that moment, but I wasn't thinking right because I was scared for my life, and I said, "Bless you." I then heard him say back, "Thank you." I lipped out the words, "Oh crap, screw me." Footsteps then came to the closet and we heard the door open. We couldn't hide ourselves anymore because I had just exposed myself in my presence. So I walked up to Enrique and Mary ran off. He tried grabbing me, but before he could do that, I kicked him in the groin, to which he fell on his knees and groaned in pain. Then after that, I punched him right in the nose, which made his whole body lay down on the floor. It hurt my hand a little, but that wasn't the main focus at that moment. I ran out of the house and got outside and saw that Mary was walking up to her neighbor's steps. She got to the door and she rang the doorbell like a dozen times. Just as I got to that door, I saw an old woman open the door and she was asking what was wrong. I told her that my ex-boyfriend had broken into Mary's house to find where I was, and that I'd fought back and that he was still in the house. She let us in and Mary called the police on her cell phone, which she had in her pocket. The police came no later than 8 minutes. They searched Mary's house, but they couldn't find Enrique anywhere. We thanked them for the help, and I told an officer that I would report everything the next day at the station. The officer said okay, and they left after that. I went back into Mary's house to pack everything up, and I called my mother, which she was surprisingly still up. I told her to come pick me up, and I explained everything to her. She came 15 minutes later. I got home and immediately went to bed. The next morning, I went with my mother to the police station and gave my report. Weeks went by, and I finally got a restraining order against Enrique for 5 years. He couldn't be within 300 feet of me. The restraining order did eventually end, but Enrique never tried to contact me again, even though I have him blocked on everything. It's a good thing that he's moved on. Hi, Raven. I'm a new listener to your podcast, and I've listened to so many already, which encouraged me to write you a couple of stories of my own. I've had a few paranormal experiences in my lifetime. I do have quite a few different stories, so I'm not sure if you just want to tell one or multiple of them. Starting off with just a quick little background. I'm a 16-year-old female, and ever since I was little, I feel like I've been able to communicate/see many sorts of spirits. It's super weird, I know, but it's so weird to me, even. For starters, a little background to this story. I have a little sister. I was probably around 7 to 8 years old when this happened. Our house was kind of small, and so the setup was my room on one side, and my sisters were directly across from mine. My parents slept in the basement. Mind you, this happened many times, and so whenever I got scared, I went downstairs to sleep with my parents. So, it was at night. My mom had just tucked me and my sister in, and we both used to keep our doors open because it was scary. So, obviously, I could see straight into my sister's room. I had a loft bed at the time. It's like a bunk bed, but without a bottom bunk. Just for stuff like storage, work, space, etc. For some reason, I always woke up in the dead middle of the night. I'm not quite sure why, but everyone thought that it was weird too. It didn't matter if I went to bed late or early. I always woke up dead in the middle of the night. It used to terrify me. Anyways, that specific night, I had woken up for some reason, and I was wide awake, and so I opened my eyes and looked around. Here's where I absolutely freak out. I look over towards my sister's room, and I just see this huge figure standing right outside her door, just staring at me. It was definitely taller than the door. It didn't really have a face, I guess. It was a completely black figure just standing there. So, obviously, I'm literally 8 years old, and I cover myself up with every blanket on my bed and did not look. I didn't get up, and I couldn't fall back asleep. My whole body was shaking so badly. This experience has haunted me for years and years. I'm not too sure if it's the same spirit, but ever since then, I constantly feel like I'm being watched. And sometimes, out of the corner of my eye, I can see a tall, dark figure scurry through. To this day, it still haunts me, and I'm always whipping my head around as if I've seen something. I don't know how to get it away or to leave. Has this happened to anyone else before? Or maybe I'm just crazy. Super short side note as well. There are so many more experiences with the paranormal I've had, but they are super short. Anyways, a short little story. So, I work at a hotel as a housekeeper. The weird thing is, the hotel is supposedly haunted. It creeps me out a little because I'm always listening to your podcasts while working, and ever since I started working there last year, it's been really weird. Like, I always see figures out of the corner of my eye time and time again. I've heard a really, really deep voice saying my name, making me literally run out of the room no matter what I'm doing. But I think I was most scared when I came home from work. I had brought this really weird cowbell that I found inside a hotel room, and I brought it home. Our house is currently set up like mine and my sister's room are upstairs and my parents' room is downstairs. I was messing with my mom, saying like, oh, if I ring this bell, it summons spirits. Stupid, I know. But I ring it because it's literally just a bell. Nothing weird, right? I mean, beside the fact that I brought it home from a haunted hotel. Anyway, I rang it and then had gone upstairs to change my clothes. You know when you can hear someone walking behind you? If you have creaky floors like my house does. I walked upstairs into my room and I swear I heard my dog coming in behind me. So I turned around to pet him and greet him. Well, he was actually downstairs laying on the couch. I'm not even kidding, my heart dropped. It seriously scared the hell out of me because it literally sounded like my dog, which made me start thinking about 100 billion different things. It almost sounded like a little child walking behind me. It sounds so dumb, but like, what if the thing from the hotel followed me home? I have seriously debated quitting because it scares me so much seeing and hearing things, but also, I feel like I'm one of the very select people that can see and hear them because I've had connections with the afterlife many times. Like I said, I have so many more stories, but they are quite short. Please do let me know if you want to hear them. I love telling people my stories, but I just wish that they wouldn't happen to me.